All right, potties, you're making a difference. Because of you and the people that listen to the show on Way FM terrestrially, if you want to call it that, we have sent over 47,000 meals to the people that are struggling in Ukraine after they've been displaced because of the war. That is pretty stinking amazing. And I love the fact that you're getting to partner with us in ministry right now in a very tangible way. You're not only helping feed people, but you're also making sure that they get the gospel as well. So thank you so much. But sadly, as the war stretches on, the need is still there and becoming greater. Here's the great news, though. It only takes 25 cents to send one meal. So for about the cost of a dinner out for you and your family, you could make sure that a couple hundred meals are sent to Ukrainian refugee families. Can you imagine what a relief that is for moms who have no idea how they're going to feed their kids from day to day? This is truly ministering to the orphans and widows, like the Bible says in James. And we'd love to keep that going and send another 25,000 meals to Ukraine in just the next couple weeks. I'm in. I'll never ask you to do something I'm not willing to do myself. So if you want to help out, just text the word Wally to 91999. And again, thank you so much for even considering this. And let's make a difference. Let's do something huge today. Again, text the word Wally to 91999. Welcome to the Wally Show Aftercast. All those things we did not get to during the show today.
Can you hear me crunching on these?
Oh, yeah, you're eating. I hear you completely.
Is that really loud?
It's in my head.
You're not trying to avoid the loud.
I mean, there's one thing that could happen. You could stop eating so that we could do the Aftercast. Because I was just like, yeah, we are all ready to go. And I heard everybody's ready to go. Even heard that from you. So, yeah, if you could finish that last bite, that'd be great. And then we'll do this later. We'll pick up with that. I don't know. I can hear you eating. Can you hear me drinking?
I can throw I can start sniffling.
Please don't.
Yeah, Gavin doesn't feel well today, but he does not have COVID where you've been reassured.
No, took some tests.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, so that was negative. But it's not even I don't feel sick in any regard per se. It's just when you have that little bit of sniffles that's hanging on, makes your voice sound like you're just a dummy, and makes Betty make fun of you.
Only guy to get a cold this year. The only person probably to get a cold this year and get sick.
Why do you want to keep jinxing us?
Other than COVID. I know. And, people around us started getting it again. Oh, no. And Betty Rock and I have somehow been immune to this.
I'm not cheering for y'all to get COVID.
Right.
Definitely not. But I wouldn't mind not feeling like the only one who didn't get it, who didn't have the tiger's blood that's keeping it out of bay for y'all.
I never bragged about it. I never did. It's all Wally, because I know the minute I say I never got it is when I will get it, and you're taking me down with you.
I try to be not very braggadocious about it, and I try to whisper it so God doesn't hear me because he does have a vicious sense of humor. But I do know that I'll get it on the last day, the day that they have proclaimed no more COVID cases. We're all officially done. I'll be like, excuse me, little scratchy throat, got a fever. Great, Wally, you got it. So I'll be the last person to get COVID, I'm sure. But Gavin, back, he was out on Friday. Where did you go again? Oh, no, you just stayed in town with your in-laws.
We were in town. Haley and her dad did some antique shopping and hanging out. I went to a couple of things if I was feeling up to it. But yeah, just total staycation. And I was the dog sitter for most of the days. And yeah, it was nothing. It was nice. Very much nothing.
Home alone.
Yep.
Not a bad thing.
No.
All right, so let's get into some of this. I found a really weird story. There was a Nevada couple that they were keeping a cache of weapons and things like that. You're like, oh, no. But that's not even the weirdest part. The weirdest part is where they were living. They were living in a children's museum.
What?
Where they worked. So bizarre. I've always heard of stories like this. So the guy was a janitor and the wife was a manager, and they had 2 kids, and they were living in the place at different I don't know if they would move, if they would hide their stuff. I have no idea. But then they had all these weapons and stuff. It was really weird.
That's creepy.
But yeah, and so they were living there, and authorities say that along with the board members, they kind of walked through the property and saw signs that people had been living there, like sleeping bags and mattresses and clothes and food, and they were all in off limits areas to visitors. But they're like, how did you guys not know this was going on? Running this this thing.
Right.
And so, but I guess if she's the manager and he's the janitor, they can control.
Also, we're picturing like a museum that's like a state of the art nice one.
Yeah. No, it's a kids museum. It's like, it's not. It's one of those.
Probably pretty janky.
Yeah, it's one of those like things you take your kids to, and then you like hose them off when you go home because you're like, that was pretty gross, like a tourist trap.
So
probably.
then in that situation, then you're like, okay, then that checks out.
Yeah, they still don't know how it happened, but they've issued an apology, and they were shocked and sad, and so was I. But it's weird, all the armament that these people had.
Did they explain?
No,
why?
None of that. Like, so it's like they're facing some weird charges.
What state was it in?
There's Nevada.
Oh, yeah, you did say that.
Nevada.
Not quite like the South, where you'd maybe say, oh, they're just Southerners.
If you've already listened to the Aftercast, or the podcast, rather, you heard me doing a thing about why we're so offendable today and how crazy it is, and a fake meme about social interactions. This one, sadly, this one could have been the joke meme. Honestly, it's so unbelievable that people on Twitter are having this conversation. Twitter is just a bastion for ignorance.
But this one is real.
This is real. This isn't the joke.
We're not talking about oranges and mangoes.
No. That was the other one. This one is real. People are arguing on Twitter that Anne Frank had white privilege. Like, are you kidding me?
She was Jewish, right?
Yes, and she hid from the Nazis before being sent to a concentration camp at 15 and dying. Like, how, in what twisted mindset do you have that she had white privilege?
Well, what makes them think that she did?
Well, here you go. This is where we've gotten to in our world, okay? So they're saying that European Jews had light skin, so they could easier pass for non-Jewish and avoid the Holocaust, whereas darker-skinned people who have been persecuted in the U.S. and elsewhere around the world can't just hide from it. You're like, what in the world? Now we're ranking sufferings like this, the atrocities of the Holocaust, and you're trying to co-opt off of that to further your agenda of oppression? There's something seriously wrong with you. You are disturbed if that's the argument you're going to make.
I understand that you're getting yourself amped up.
Yes.
But I saw an article that was claiming something about this, and most people see it as ridiculous.
Well, again, most people do, but this is where we get to where everyone is so offended about everything, and so, no, we've got to be so politically correct that they actually are having this discussion in real, like for real. Like, it's not something that somebody shuts down and goes, okay, now we're being stupid. Let's stop this right now.
I will say that in my mind, the benefit of the internet in some ways is that a lot of this stuff does exist on the internet where people do unleash their offendedness per se. But I will say that I'm grateful that I don't tend to ever quite run into that in person.
And before, exactly, it was a fringe thing where people just on Twitter had discussions and you go, you're Twitter knuckleheads. But now what happens is mainstream media, which blows, by the way, will use Twitter as an actual real source.
It's like when you were writing a paper and they were like, don't use Wikipedia as a source. The whole world's like, Twitter is now the go-to source for actual facts.
And this is part of the problem. This is kind of why I bring it up, because what happens is they'll take a fringe, obscure, weird story where it's a few people discussing and arguing this and being dumb, like this or whatever it is. And then they cover it and then they treat it like it's the rest of the world feels this way. And nothing could be further from the truth, but they put it out as truth, and they put it out as large volumes of truth, like that this is the prevailing thought of the day, and it's not.
That's why Trump becoming president was such an interesting, dilemma, because I think the whole world was just like so against him when he was in the voting process that they were so, I think, convinced that Hillary was going to be our president, and then the people who don't speak up on the internet voted,
right?
And we ended up like that.
That was fascinating.
That was
when I went to bed, I figured Hillary was in, and then I woke up the next morning and I thought it was a joke when I heard the things. I'm like, oh wow, okay, well here we go, let's do this. So there's a lot of stuff like online that drives me crazy with these kind of things, and people giving credibility to lunacy. and that's where you run into problems. We'll talk about this. I know this is kind of more in the entertainment world, but we'll dive into this before we get to Betty Rocks. I went and saw Thor over the weekend. Thor: Love and Thunder, and so my wife wanted to see it too, which I could not believe.
I was surprised to even hear you say that when I walked in this morning.
Yeah, she was like, "Oh, we could go see Thor," and I'm like, "Love Chris Hemsworth much?" And so we go and see Thor, and it was not a good movie. And I'm not a Marvel fan, but here's what they did well. You didn't have to be a Marvel fan and understand all the Thor stuff to get this movie. I got it. Okay, I get the backstory, not a problem. But I just don't think it was good. So I would be interested to see, Gavin, when you go as a Marvel fan, if you actually like it, because it is super. It's two movies. It's super kitschy and weird and tongue in cheek. But then they've got what's his name? Christian Bale is the bad guy. And he's serious and he's very macabre and he's great. But those two movies didn't interact well,
I wonder if they artistically tried to do that, to have the contrast, because the first couple Thor movies where he played, with Chris Hemsworth, he was really cheesy, and not even in a funny way. They were trying to be cheesy in a serious way, and it was terrible.
Right.
They did the third one where they made him super jokey, kitschy, and funny, and that was a successful formula. But then what I've been reading online is that the formula is almost too shoved down your throat in this movie. So as a Marvel fan, I'll be curious to see because nowadays you go into so many movies with so much preconceived ideas and thoughts. Right. I can't go into this movie fresh now at all. So I'm hoping that maybe knowing all that, I can say, oh, okay, I see that they're doing this. Turn that off and just enjoy what you're watching. Yeah,
and speaking of formula and shoved down your throat, if you're going to go see it with your kids, it's a PG-13. You've seen the trailer where they're like, oh, and Zeus blows his clothes off, accidentally, and so then all the women swoon, and so you're going to have to explain that to your kids. And then there's the rock creature, whoever that is. I have no idea what that is. That rock creature's gay, and then the other fighting girl is gay. Mm-hmm. And so you've got the story between, this is what's crazy, you've got the story between Thor and the girl, what is her name?
Natalie
Portman, Lady Thor. And so, so you've got a love story between a heterosexual couple, but then they're like, oh, but we can't just do that. Dang it, that's too normal, and that's just not representative enough, so we can't just have that be the story. Now we have to throw in these fringe character storylines that have nothing to do with the plot at all. And so they're just putting it in there to be inclusive where it doesn't need it. Those two characters, you don't need that part of their backstory at all to make the movie, but they're just doing that because the agenda is driving them. Plus, it's also a Disney company, so they're going to keep forcing that agenda, that LGBTQ plus whatever agenda in everything that they do now. It's insane. It didn't need to be there, but so the reason I say that is just, if you're planning on seeing this with your kids, know that that's a conversation you're going to have as well. But then it's really weird because I talked with a friend of mine who has young kids, and we were having this discussion about all of the prevalence of this in different media and different outlets and things like that. And he goes, it's tough for me because my kids are around it. They are going to be subjected to it. It's not going away, and so how do I choose to talk with them about it, or do we just completely avoid it where they can't avoid it at their schools or wherever they are? So do we go and see a movie and then I explain it? He's still wrestling through that and processing that, because I think that's a fair point, because you want to say, well, I just won't support anything like that, and I get that, and that's a right and a choice as well. But as a parent, it would be really hard to say, well, we're not going to go see that because of this, when you're at school and somebody's a kid in your class has 2 moms, and then you got to, so it's kind of like they're around it in the culture. So how do you process it? How do you deal with it? You can't just avoid it, so that's tricky. I feel for parents.
I think it's
now.
just tricky in general to be a parent right now.
Yeah, I think so too. You got social media and bullying and all that stuff.
That scares me more about being a parent when it comes to all that, because you asked me a week or 2 ago about like all the violence that's been happening, and that's scary. It's way more scary in my brain to handle the world and faith. That is a world that I do not look forward to. I hopefully have good bullet points for a kid someday, but it's going to be tough.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like, kids seem to talk less about faith. Like, I've noticed this even in my daughter. Like, we'd ask her things about her friends. Are they a Christian? Do they go to church? And I don't know. Like, it's weird. Like, the conversations, and she's 23. They don't seem to be having a bunch of faith conversations. But they know where everybody stands on LGBTQ. Like, they know exactly what all their friends' stance on that is, because that seems to be more important to them. And then I was listening to this guy. It was at church, actually. He was doing the message, the pastor, and they were talking about how it's really causing a rift between parents and kids and older kids, how there's a difference in, it's so sad that the LGBTQ issue has become so divisive even in our families, because like somebody who's older might go, yeah, I do have a problem with this, but somebody who grew up with it or has more friends that are in that community has less of a problem with it. And so they just write the parents off as, bigots, and then, well, you're just closed-minded bigot. And then they start a fight with their parents. And you're like, that's not what I said at all, But I've had to navigate this with my own daughter, because she's in the arts community, and a bunch of her friends are gay. And for her, she's grown up with it, and it's not a thing. They don't think about it. They don't talk about it, And so anytime I have any sort of opinion politically on it, it's almost like she'll shut down. And I think she gets frustrated with me that I'm taking like this biblical stance, or whatever, or I have this opinion. And no matter how many times I try to say, I'm not mad at your friends. Your friends are great. Love them. They're good people. They're kind. But there's still a spiritual element to this that we can't just ignore either. And the agenda is my problem, not the person. So, but it doesn't translate.
I think it's hard just because whatever, my mom always said, be careful with the friends that you choose, because however they act, those bad things are going to rub off on you.
Absolutely.
And so, saying that, what I mean is, I think it's
you're not saying LGBTQ people are bad. I want to clarify for you.
What I'm saying is, our culture, we're around it 24/7. It's being shoved down our throats 24/7, and so we think it's the norm.
Right.
And so to stand out and say the complete opposite, you do look like you're being a bully.
Right.
And it just seems like the norm. Like,
but that's what they want.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. What I'm saying is that, things in the past that seemed normal, seemed normal because culture was just going with it. Everyone was just agreeing and going with it. But I don't know if that's the same for this whole movement of LGBTQ plus whatever.
I think that Christianity is just being tagged so heavily with like with the exclusivity tag. Like, we're not inclusive, we're very exclusive. And if I just sat here and told you, hey, this is just what this says, if this is what the Bible says, they're just going to tell me, that's wrong.
Right.
Or so. And I'm not sitting here being like, oh, no, I personally came up with everything that. No, it's just like, this is something that was written thousands of years ago. I believe it wholeheartedly, but they're just placing that like exclusivity tag on it. Whereas in the past, it was the more dominant, I think.
Well, but the thing is, it's still the more dominant thing.
You're right.
But that's not what gets put forth. What gets put forth, movies, media, TV, things like that, is that no, this is the dominant. Yeah. This is really what is happening, and this is the culture of the world. And it's not. It's still a tiny, tiny fraction of our overall population. But that's where they've done a great job at infiltrating it and marketing it. And hey, hats off, man. Like, that movement, they're really great at getting their agenda out. Good on you. I wish that we were as good at marketing ourselves inside the church sometimes. All right, Lady Rock, what do you got?
You pretty much did it.
What?
Thor was considered too goofy and jokey by most people.
I forgot we were doing Thor today with you. Sorry, and I jumped right in there. I just stole your thunder. Your love and thunder. I'm sorry.
What a meanie.
I know. That's my bad. Sorry about that.
That was it.
Oh, good. Well, I guess we're done. You got some birthdays?
We don't have any birthdays, but we can do a question if
I'd
you like.
that. I would love that.
Melissa said...
Question, why do you always steal my stories?
Melissa said, if Jesus called in for hashtag your weekend or booyah your weekend, what do you think his hashtag or his booyah would be? And would it be awkward for you to say boo to Jesus?
There's a weird, twisted part of me that would definitely boo him no matter what the story was. Just because it would be funny. Yeah, because it would be funny. Because everyone would go, you don't boo Jesus. You know, so I would definitely boo him.
I think his hashtags or his booyays would have something to do with volunteering somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
And like helping others.
Probably some humble brags.
Ugh.
Yeah, just turning water
Make
on.
us all feel bad about we sat on the couch and watched trash TV.
Is that what you do? Oh, Betty Rock went to, she threatened on Friday to go to Kitty Hall at City Hall. And I did go and did not come back with a cat.
But, I mean, it was only by God's grace that I didn't because there were so many to choose from. And the cutest thing that they did was they had names for all of them, but they put their pictures up on the wall with their, whether like what their weight was, what their eye color was, what color their fur is, and all this stuff, and their name. And it was so cute. And then if one got adopted... Did they list
them as boy and girl? Oh, so they weren't gender. So they actually had genders.
Yeah,
that's good. Identifies as.
It doesn't mean that you can use those pronouns. Though.
I know, but that's what's so funny. We still list animals as gender specific.
But anyways, when a kitten would get adopted, they would take his little picture off the wall, and it was just precious.
You told me the cutest, saddest story of 3 little girls you met, and my heart just broke.
So I met these 3 girls. They were probably between the ages of 5 and 10, and they all came in together with their mom. And I started a conversation with one of the little girls, and I said, "Oh, are you here to adopt a kitten?" And she said, "Yeah." Something about. I said, "Well, what, have you picked a favorite?" And she was like, "Not yet, but Mom said we can't get any kitten that's orange because of our cat that we had, Biscuit." And I was like, "What happened to Biscuit?" And she said, "I can't talk about her too much or I'll start crying." And it made me so sad.
That's sad.
Found out that Biscuit was like 17 years old and passed last month. And so they were there to get 2 new kittens. And
nice.
2?
Yeah, and I kind of helped them like try to figure out which one went, got along with another one. And they chose one, Gilligan. Oh. And then they couldn't figure out which other kitten to take with Gilligan. And
so they didn't take another one?
No, they did.
Oh,
they
okay.
did. But it was just so fun just to watch those girls get excited about it because I was just like, I'm still like that. I just see a little kitten. I'm like, oh my gosh!
I know.
I'm gonna kill it.
Yeah, I'm gonna beat it first. The 2 little black kittens, the all black ones. Oh my gosh, the brothers. Those were so.
Were
adorable.
they actually brothers or did they?
I have no idea.
They look the same.
There were a lot of black and white ones and black. There was one orange one, but then again, I came after the event had been going on for 2 hours, and they said that they had already gotten 8 kittens adopted.
Nice. Oh, that's good.
So it was.
We used to bring,
good.
before you got here, we used to bring cats in for Betty Rock's birthday.
Oh, that's so cool.
And so we'd do Cinco de Mayo or Cinco de Betty, and then we'd bring cats in, and she'd have to like answer questions or whatever to determine whether she could pet a cat or not.
And one of them fell asleep, Mr. Freckles.
Mr. Freckles!
He fell asleep in my arms.
I still regret not getting Mr. Freckles. That and Sir Doodle. Those are the 2 animal regrets I have in this life.
You wouldn't if you were outside scooping up Mr. Sir Doodle's poop. You'd be like,
that's true.
I will say I did that this weekend.
Yeah.
Just don't get a dog.
Yeah. I would have gotten a fence.
It's not worth it.
Yeah.
I would have gotten a fence and just let him go nuts in the backyard.
Then you'd hit it with your mower.
Yeah.
Oh no! And get it little, like little puppies.
Yeah.
Make little doo-doos.
Yeah, that's a good
Don't
idea.
get medium to large size dogs.
Yeah. Don't get a Great Dane.
Throw a pair of shoes out this weekend.
Oh, did he bite your shoes?
No.
Oh,
No.
no, worse. Oh, that's funny.
Way worse.
That's funny. And he knows they're your shoes. You don't see him doing that to Haley's. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for our Aftercast today. And as always, thanks for being a potty.